Other guys get swords, magic, or dragon blood after death. I woke up inside a rescue pod the size of a closet. The star outside was cracking, and my oxygen timer said 9 hours. Fuel, 14 minutes. Hull integrity, 62%. Internal heat, falling. Around me spun 6 dead worlds and 1 dying sun. I died once and came back inside a failing toolbox. The pod was still tumbling. Every few seconds, the cracked viewport showed a different world, then black space, then the bright fracture splitting the central star like a broken furnace seam. A blue ring lit across the console. Not a combat class, not a level-up menu. It called itself the Resonance Navigation Loop. Scan anomalies, read hidden routes, pull charge from dead systems. Then the warning text arrived. Every activation consumed reserve power and fed back into the nervous system. Translation: the loop could save me, but my own body would pay the bill. I needed numbers before I needed hope. Oxygen 9 hours, fuel 14 minutes, battery 31%, repair foam 1 can, water half a liter, food 2 protein bricks, no weapon. Then the pod lurched hard to port. A metal slab the size of a refrigerator spun past the glass close enough to scrape sparks off my hull. Another hit like that and I was done. I grabbed the cracked control grips and hit the thrusters. They coughed once, then died. The fuel line was half clogged, and the pod kept drifting straight toward a fresh belt of wreckage. Fine. First test. I opened the loop and selected vector trace on the incoming debris. Cost, 12 reserve units. Potential gain, unknown. I triggered it, and the whole world tilted sideways. For 1 second, I could see trajectories as pale lines in space. The largest fragment was not random. It was sliding along a hidden pull toward a nearby moon covered in ash and vent scars. I shoved the pod 2 meters down using the fragment's own momentum. It worked. The slab missed my hull by less than a hand width. Then my vision blurred and nausea hit like a hammer. Price confirmed. 1 small correction and I was shaking so hard I bit my tongue. Blood in my mouth. Hands numb for 5 minutes. Good. The loop worked, but never for free. The dodge paid out more than survival. A battery crate snapped loose from the same wreck cluster and bounced off my emergency grapple. I reeled it in by hand before it drifted away. Inventory check. Battery 31 to 46%. Fuel still 14 minutes. Oxygen 8 hours 42. I had spent 12 reserve units and almost threw up, but I had 1 real move left. That was when I heard the voice. Thin, metallic, annoyed. Unlicensed docking behavior detected. A maintenance drone was clipped to my outer hatch, hanging on by 1 bent magnetic arm. I cycled the lock and pulled it inside. Old shell. Scorched plating. 1 amber optic. "You look worse than my last operator," it said. Good. Sarcastic machinery was still machinery. It identified itself as Archive Assistant Unit R7. Then it corrected itself. Archive degraded. Nav lattice incomplete. Partial memory loss. Mood unfavorable. Useful and rude. I asked the only question that mattered. "Can you fly this pod?" The optic dimmed. "No, but I can tell you why it is dying." Fair enough. That still made it useful today. According to R7, this was not a natural system. It was a pocket structure held together by orbital anchors. At least 3 anchors were offline. That was why the star had started to crack. If the core destabilized fully, worlds would collide, burn, or fall inward. Survival window for the whole system, unknown. Survival window for my pod if I did nothing, under 8 hours. So the big problem was cosmic collapse. The immediate problem was smaller and meaner. I had 8 hours of air and a drifting tin can. First objective, reach something stable before debris did. R7 marked 3 options. The ash moon. Close, hot, full of vent bursts. The hollow world. Farther, maybe sealed ruins. The observatory, safer approach window, but not for another 21 minutes. I checked fuel. 14 minutes of thrust meant none of those choices were free. The observatory needed 18. The hollow world needed 26. The ash moon needed 9. Easy math, ugly answer. Moon first, R7 said. You need heat exchangers and fuel cells, not philosophy. I hated that it was right. If I chased answers now, I would suffocate before I found any. Then the pod alarms screamed again. A new debris wave came off the broken starboard rail above me. Not junk this time. Coolant tanks, antenna ribs, and one shattered shuttle nose cone. Direct impact would pulp me. Running would burn half my fuel. I forced one slow breath, opened the loop again, and scanned the wave for something I could steal instead of just dodge. Battery reserve 34%. Scan cost 8. I paid it. Lines unfolded across space again. One coolant tank still had a guidance fin. If I redirected it, I could slingshot moonward. The move would save fuel and maybe hand me a working coolant core. It would also require more force than the first dodge. Estimated bodily backlash, severe. Great. I paid anyway. I caught the spinning tank with a vector latch and pulled its nose 6 degrees starward. The pod jerked so hard my harness cut my ribs. Something popped in my left ear hard, but the math held. The tank clipped my hull instead of crushing it, then dragged the pod into a hot, fast arc toward the ash moon. Fuel spent. 3 minutes. Distance gained. 12 clicks. Reward check. Hull 58%. Fuel 11 minutes. Battery 38. Oxygen 7 hours 54. Attached mass. 1 damaged coolant tank and 1 maintenance drone with a bad attitude. R7 fed me a descent line and one last problem. A dead anchor relay lay near the safe landing zone. Clean landing meant survival. Hot landing at the relay meant resonance cores. I chose the relay. Other stories call this progress. I called it controlled roasting. The ash moon was now my first real resource loop. Heat, salvage, fuel, clues, and regular chances to die in public. External temperature kept climbing with each vent cycle. Safe pod time, 3 hours before the seals softened. Oxygen, 7 hours 40. Fuel, 10 minutes 52. Battery, 38%. The relay tower stood 200 meters away, half buried in hot ash and vent pipes. It looked dead. In this system, dead things were usually either useful or about to explode. R7 floated to the hatch and pinged the outside. Surface stable for 7 minutes at a time. After that, vent cycles. I asked what happened on minute 8. You boil, it said. So Block 2 wrote itself. Short runs, hard numbers. No heroics. Get parts. Get back. Repeat until the pod stopped trying to cook me alive. If possible, also avoid boiling in a crater. First run, tools. I had 1 foam can, 1 pry bar, a bad suit, and R7's lamp. I marked the pod with a beacon and sprinted for the relay before the next vent pulse hit hard. The ash crust looked solid until my third step punched through and dumped my leg into hot grit up to the knee. Not lethal, just enough pain to remind me this moon hated ankles. I reached the relay base with 40 seconds left in the surface window. The lower hatch was fused. Manual entry would take too long. The loop offered vector torque. Cost, 6 reserve units. I paid the 6. The hatch bolts twisted all at once. My stomach flipped so hard, I had to brace one hand on the tower wall. Price: blurred vision and a ringing left ear again. Inside, the temperature dropped by 15 degrees. Better. Also darker, tighter, and full of old service racks. R7's optic brightened. Archive signature detected. I hated this place, it said. The relay core was dead, but not empty. I found 2 intact heat sinks, 1 cracked power brick, and a coil of thermal mesh. Inventory jumped before the first 7-minute cycle was even over. Back at the pod, I did the math. Heat sinks could buy me 3 more hours of cabin safety. The power brick might lift battery from 38 to 48 if it did not explode first. I installed 1 sink, fed the brick through the pod's dirty converter, and listened for sparks. None. Battery climbed to 46. Hull still 58. Oxygen 7 hours 12. Better, not good. That was the first cycle. Run out. Grab parts. Pay with sweat, time, and nervous system damage. Come back alive. If I repeated it right, this moon would turn from death trap into repair shop. Second run. Fuel. R7 found a broken pipeline map in the relay and highlighted 3 old condenser pits. If any still held volatile coolant, I could refine thrust mix and buy real range. The nearest pit sat in a field of vent mouths. The map showed a 90-second calm interval between eruptions. 90 seconds there, 90 seconds back. Assuming I ran like a guilty electrician, I opened the pit and nearly laughed. 3 sealed coolant canisters sat in the rack like somebody had hidden money under the floorboards. Then the rack moved. Something under it clicked and hissed. It was not a machine. It was a crawler the size of a dog, all ceramic plates and furnace-red eyes. Ash mites. R7 called them thermal scavengers. I called them a problem with teeth. 1 mite alone was manageable. The pit held 6. I had a pry bar, weak boots, and exactly 0 interest in fist-fighting kiln lizards in a pressure suit. Direct combat was stupid math. The vents around the pit were on a rhythm. The mites knew the safe pockets. I did not. So I stopped trying to beat them and started trying to move them with the moon's own schedule. I threw a loose panel into the far trench and hit it with the loop. Cost: 5 reserve. A small shove, just enough to make it clang across the vent mouths like a dinner bell. All 6 mites turned and charged the sound. Right on time, the trench vents opened. White fire blasted upward and launched 2 mites into the dark. The others scattered long enough for me to grab fuel. I got back with 3 canisters and a fresh burn on my glove where 1 mite clipped me. Profit check. Fuel 10 minutes 52 to 22 minutes. Reserve units down by 11. Worth it. Price check. Both hands trembling. Pulse too high. Eyes tracking heat plumes after I shut the hatch. The loop was not magic. It was rented control, and my nervous system was paying interest. By the end of hour 2, I had a pattern. Relay for parts. Condenser pits for coolant. Pod for install. R7 counted seconds, mocked me, and still found lockers I missed somehow. On the 4th cycle, I found the first real clue. Deep in the relay archive sat a maintenance plaque listing Orbital Anchor 2 as Ash Pressure Vent Authority. This moon was part of the system. It was not just scenery. It bled heat and pressure away from the core. If its relay chain failed, the whole pocket star cooked faster. Beautiful. I had landed on a broken safety valve. That changed my priorities. Before, the moon was a gas station. Now it was evidence too. Somebody built this system with worlds as mechanisms. The mystery stopped being abstract and got expensive. I asked R7 if we could restart the relay. Partially, it said. Needs one resonance core and manual alignment. I asked where I got a core. It rotated one optic toward the lower shaft. Below the relay ran a service tube into the old pressure farms. Hazard note: unstable, high heat, unknown fauna. Naturally, the useful thing was buried in the dangerous place. Very on brand. I checked inventory before going deeper. Oxygen 6 hours 1. Fuel 22 minutes. Battery 47. Heat sink life 2 hours 30. 1 pry bar. 1 drone. 1 nervous system complaining. The lower shaft dropped through layers of warm metal and old soot into a huge underground chamber. Rows of dead pumps stood in ash like pillars. At the center glowed one live machine, a resonance pump, cracked, leaking light, still humming after who knew how many years. The core sat inside its chest like a blue heart. Too bad 3 larger ash mites were nesting under it. These were not dog-sized scavengers. These were loader-class brutes, each with plated jaws big enough to crack my pod open. Fighting them was not even an option. I needed theft, not victory. R7 scanned the pump rhythm and found my answer. Every 50 seconds, the machine vented superheated gas upward. The mites huddled in the low, cool pocket during charge phase, so I changed the pocket. The chamber floor held old ash sluice gates. Rusted, heavy, manual. Too heavy for me. Not too heavy for vector torque if I felt like vomiting again. Cost estimate: 14 reserve units. I spent it. The nearest gate snapped open and dumped a river of hot grit across the mite's nest. They bolted exactly where I needed them, under the pump exhaust cone. Then the vent cycle hit. The blast did not kill all 3. It did kill one and crack the shell of another. The last brute slammed into a pillar and came straight at me anyway, half blind and fully angry. I ran, cut left, and kicked over a maintenance ladder I had loosened on the way in. The brute hit it, tangled for 1 second, and that was enough. The second vent cycle hit its back. Now the chamber was mine for maybe 30 seconds. I ripped the pump panel open with the pry bar and yanked the resonance core free. The whole machine dropped into silence behind me. Immediate payoff. The dead brute disintegrated into conductive ash that R7 tagged as salvage. Core gain, 1. Thermal ash gain, 30 units. New problem: the chamber alarms had finally noticed me. When a building that old wakes up, it does not say hello, R7 said. Red lights came on. The lower shaft purge cycle armed. I had 90 seconds to get out before the tube vented fire. I climbed like a thief on rent day, slammed the hatch above me and collapsed in the relay entry while my suit temperature warnings screamed. I tasted copper and saw double for a full minute. Inventory check from the floor. Resonance core 1. Battery 47. Fuel 22. Oxygen 5 hours 18. Reserve nearly dry. Headache, tunnel vision, and hands that looked borrowed. I should have gone straight back to the pod. Instead, I crawled to the relay cradle and slotted the core into the dead tower. If I was already miserable, I wanted data for the trouble. The relay woke in stages. First lights, then fans. Then a star map made of dust blue lines. Finally, the tower projected 6 worlds and 3 anchor chains, 2 of them red, 1 completely dark. Anchor 2 responded at 11%. Not enough to save the moon, but enough to open archived lanes. R7 emitted a noise I eventually realized was joy buried under sarcasm and static. The map showed a time transfer route to the hollow world. Window in 41 minutes. Travel cost with current fuel. 19 minutes if I use the moon's own thermal launch rail. That was huge. It also showed why I could not stay. The Ash Moon's pressure farms were failing in sequence. Surface rupture forecast, 6 hours. This whole place was turning into a boiler with no release valve. Good. Reason to move confirmed. My favorite kind of decision is the one where the environment removes all fake options and leaves only the expensive one that works. Saves time and philosophy. Good. Reason to move confirmed. Then the moon billed me again. Fresh bite marks on my hull. Small mites had followed my heat trail and started chewing cables at the pod itself. R7 suggested overloading the cracked power brick into thermal mesh under the belly panels. Improvised deterrent grid. Cost: 11 battery and 1 fuel line bypass. Mistime it and I cook my ship. I like the odds better than letting metal termites eat my life support. We wired the mesh under the hull, baited the mites with vent residue, and waited 30 meters away behind a slag ridge. 7 mites came. Good. More targets. Same battery cost. I armed the grid when the first one sank its jaws into the cable bundle. The whole pod flashed blue-white for half a second. The mites did not explode. Better. They locked up, dropped and rolled, twitching off the hot slope into a vent ditch. Pod safe. Battery 47 to 36. Hull ugly but no longer edible. That was the first real tactical kill of the run. I hadn't beaten stronger enemies with force. I used the moon, their feeding habit, and one suicidal wiring job. Correct genre. Correct math. Launch prep. Fuel 22 to 23 after refining the last coolant. Battery 36. Oxygen 4 hours 42. Relay lane opens in 23 minutes. Margin if nothing breaks. Then, something else went badly. The star cracked again. Even from the moon surface, I could see a new white seam rip across the core. Every metal shadow around me shifted at once. The relay answered with a fresh packet. Emergency note from old system engineers. If Anchor 2 and the Hollow Archive both stayed dark, core collapse would accelerate by 17% per cycle. So, the Hollow World stopped being optional. It was not just my next stop. It held either records, controls, or both. If I missed this window, I might still live and lose the whole system. R7 locked into the nav chair and fed me the thermal rail timing. Do not improvise, it said. I asked if that was concern. No, it said. Pattern recognition mostly. I sealed the hatch, armed the moon rail, and put one hand on the resonance loop, just in case the launch line drifted. One bad vector at that speed would turn me into a bright argument. Inventory before ignition. Oxygen 436. Fuel 23. Battery 36. 1 resonance core spent. 1 drone attached. 1 moon relay awake. 1 route open to the Hollow World. The rail countdown hit 0. Heat slammed the pod from below and threw me into the dark. Behind me, the ash moon vented fire into space. Ahead of me, the Hollow World opened like a split stone eye. The Hollow World looked like a cracked stone egg with a slit through the middle. I hit the entry lane hard, skipped once along the shell, and landed inside a canyon of flowing light sand. Inside was the real world. The shell was hollow, and a dead city clung to the inner surface at impossible angles. Rivers of glowing sand poured between towers and bridges. Beauty check, 10 out of 10. Survival check, worse than the moon. Oxygen 421. Fuel 11 after braking. Battery 32. Wonder and bankruptcy together already. R7 ran a rapid scan and ruined the mood. Sand transfer cycle active. Upper districts exposed for 90 minutes. Lower districts will be buried. Good. A beautiful timer. I set the first rule fast. No sightseeing, no philosophy. We land, strip what we can, find oxygen, find data, and leave before the river moved. If the city wanted awe, it could invoice me later. The pod came down on a tilted service balcony that once connected 3 towers. One support arm was gone. One fuel line leaked vapor. One wrong step and my whole ship would slide into the lower basin. I spent 6 battery on docking clamps and locked the pod to the balcony rail. The clamps held. Price. Numb fingertips and a sharp flash behind my left eye. Small move. Small pain. Useful baseline. Inventory before first step out. Oxygen 418. Fuel 11. Battery 26 after clamps and suit recharge. Food 1 brick. Water 300 milliliters. Morale workable. The first corridor was packed with pale dust and memory quartz shards in the wall. R7 called them archive residue. I called them valuable if I survived long enough to cash out. Then the city moved. The whole inner shell gave one slow groan, and a fresh wave of luminous sand began spilling from upper vents toward the districts below. Routes changed live. So there was the local law. The hollow world was a rotating archive. Sand rose, fell, open streets, buried doors, and erased bad planning. If I stayed still, the map would literally delete me. First resource target, air. R7 marked an emergency locker ring in the transit hub 100 meters downslope. The bridge was gone, and the sand river would bury the hub in 30 minutes. I could burn fuel and hop the gap with the pod. Cost, too high. I could use the loop to nudge a fallen tram car into place. Cost, 8 reserve and a probable migraine. Better math. I paid the 8. The tram twitched, scraped loose, and swung just enough to kiss the far ledge. Bridge made. Price. Instant vertigo so bad I had to kneel and let my stomach negotiate with gravity. The hub lockers had been opened centuries ago, but not cleaned well. I found 2 oxygen cartridges behind a cracked panel, 1 intact seal kit, and 1 rail map etched onto a strip of alloy. Profit check. Oxygen 4, 18 to 6 hours 50. Battery still 26. Fuel 11. New map fragment. That was the first good trade of the hollow world. Take nausea, buy breathing room. The map showed 3 sectors still cycling open. Transit hub, archive spine, and core well. R7 wanted the spine for data. I wanted the well because useful things live near death. We argued for 12 seconds. Then the city solved it for us. A distress flare popped from the lower spine district, bright green against the white sand. Somebody else was alive in this machine. That changed the equation. Another survivor meant help, trouble, or both. It also meant information. And information inside a dead system usually paid better than loose scrap. The spine district had once been a vertical library wrapped around the inner shell. Sand poured through its broken roof and filled the lower halls like a glowing industrial flood. I found the flare owner halfway up a broken service ladder. Human. Suit patched with archive cloth. Left leg pinned under a fallen beam. 1 cutter torch in hand. 1 pistol on the floor out of reach. She saw my light and pointed the torch at my face first. Good sign. Cautious people live longer. If you want the locker key, she said, lift the beam before the sand takes the room. I checked the numbers. Beam mass maybe 120 kilos. Muscle was out. Loop assist was possible and expensive. Sand level rising. Time to burial, maybe 7 minutes. The vector lift cost 16 reserve and hit me like an electric punch. Blood ran warm from my right nostril before the beam even cleared. She slid free, grabbed the pistol and aimed it at me anyway. Reasonable. I would have done the same. Then the room shook, and the upper sand gate failed. 6 tons of light sand dropped into the corridor above us and started chewing the air out of the space. That ended introductions. I shoved her toward the ladder. She grabbed my wrist, and we ran the route backward while the city tried to bury all 3 of us under one very pretty avalanche. We made the tram bridge with seconds left. The ladder room vanished behind a white wall. On the hub platform, we finally traded names instead of threats. Hers was Mira Voss. Mira had been living inside the hollow world for 11 days by riding the sand cycles and looting sealed niches before each turnover. Smart, underfed, angry, and immediately useful. She also had what I needed: a physical key wafer for the archive spine and a half-charged field lantern tuned to local route markers. In return, she needed oxygen she did not have. Easy trade. I gave her 1 cartridge and half a ration. Cost, painful but fair. Reward, 1 live expert with route knowledge and a reason not to shoot me for the next few hours. First real ally, though she would hate that wording. Mira refused orders, mocked my pod, and called R7 a floating filing mistake. Perfect. The team now had edges and teeth. She explained the hollow world's real function while we moved. This place was not a city built on a planet. It was an archive drum. Sand carried memory quartz between layers and sorted data by weight. Every cycle moved records from hot sectors to cold sectors, exposing one set of rooms and burying another. The world was literally filing itself while falling around a dying star. That gave me beauty, danger, and truth in one package. It also gave me a new resource goal. Memory quartz was not just glowing rock. It stored route hashes and machine permissions. Enough quartz in a live reader could unlock maintenance zones elsewhere in the system. In other words, this world did not just have loot. It had keys to future worlds. That moved it way up my list. Mira led us toward a sealed side vault that the current sand phase had exposed for the first time in years. Inside, she said, were root wafers and maybe a portable recycler, if luck still existed. Luck had left the building long ago, but greed was still punctual. The vault door was intact, the panel dead, and a sand river was already sliding across the floor toward it, like a closing curtain. I could power the panel from my pod with a cable run. Safe, slow, impossible before burial. Or I could force the lock with vector torque. Cost estimate, 10 reserve and 1 painful afternoon. I forced the lock. The panel snapped live. The door cracked and my left hand went numb to the wrist. Cost accepted. Inside sat quartz wafers and 1 recycler module worth carrying. Recycler meant water recovery and better air use. Wafers meant roots and permissions. I started smiling. Then the vault ceiling clicked in a way I absolutely did not like. Guardian problem. A maintenance sphere unfolded from the upper corner with 6 cutter arms. Hollow world security. Still active, still loyal, still eager to disassemble grave robbers. Mira fired first and missed. The bolt only woke its second optic. I had no weapon good enough for a straight fight, and the room was too tight for pod tricks. So I used the door. We fell back through the half-open vault while the sphere chased. Mira kicked the recycler crate into the threshold. R7 overcharged the panel from his own cell. Good drone. Rare event. The security sphere sliced into the crate, lodged 1 arm in the recycler frame, and bought me a perfect 2-second window. I hit vector shove on the vault door and turned it into a guillotine. Cost, 12 reserve, tunnel vision, both knees weak. Reward, 1 dead sphere, 1 damaged but usable recycler, and 4 root wafers no longer guarded by old corporate optimism. Back at the pod, we took stock like professionals instead of scavengers. Oxygen, 650. fuel 11, battery 14, water low. New assets, mirror, recycler, wafers, key. I mounted the recycler first. Dirty ice, breath moisture, suit exhaust, vent dust. If it held hydrogen, the module wanted to turn it into water or breathable air for all of us. Repair cost was ugly. 1 seal kit, 1 heat sink plate from the moon, and 6 battery to prime the membrane stack. I paid it because thirst is non-negotiable and future me deserved 1 win. The recycler coughed, screamed, leaked gray foam, and then stabilized. Water output, plus 200 milliliters per hour. Air efficiency up 9%. Massive value. That was my first real expansion step. I no longer had just a pod. I had a pod plus a support system, plus a live route specialist, plus an archive drone who knew when to complain. Mira still refused the word team, so I used numbers instead. Crew, 3 minds, 2 bodies, 1 pod. Battery 14, fuel 11. Oxygen effective 720. Better than yesterday. R7 read the first route wafer. It projected a clean line to a maintenance dock orbiting the ocean world. Dock uncertain. Approach possible only with observatory timing or luck. So there it was. Ash moon vented pressure. Hollow world stored routes. Observatory calculated windows. The worlds were one dying machine, not 6 random pretty maps drifting for decoration. Mira read the second wafer and went quiet. It held evac notes from archive staff. Not all worlds had failed by accident. Someone had issued a controlled shutdown order on purpose. That upgraded the mystery from breakdown to intent. I had no time to unpack it because the world started filing itself again. New sand cycle. District alarms went red all around us. Hollow drift reversal in 18 minutes, R7 said. Translation. Exposed sectors would bury, buried sectors would crush, and our balcony dock would become a quartz waterfall. So that answered the stay question. Beautiful world, useful world, impossible home. If I delayed, the pod would be sandblasted, pinned, and eventually folded into the archive as one more bad record. We had to leave with as much value as we could carry. That meant one more run, nothing heroic, just selective greed. Target, lower control niche. Mira had marked near the core well line. She wanted a suit battery and a nav spindle she had cached there. I wanted whatever let this world talk to the ocean dock. R7 wanted us not to die. Mixed motives. Healthy team. The niche sat below the balcony on a maintenance spine exposed for 11 more minutes. The descent was easy. The return path was not. Sand already started refilling the channel. We found the cache intact. 1 spare suit cell, 1 nav spindle, 1 sealed packet of archive tags. Then Mira stopped at a wall panel and swore. Somebody had opened it recently. Not ancient recently. Fresh tool marks. Fresh dust fall. Somebody else had been in the niche within the last day. So the hollow world was not empty. That made every future run more social. The open panel held the real prize. A dock handshake key for maintenance ring C and a partial star log, stamped with observatory authority. Exactly what I needed and what others wanted. Then the strangers came back. 2 suit lights appeared up the channel above us. Scavengers, lean and fast, using magnetic boots and wire hooks. They saw us and did the math. They were stronger in a straight fight and knew the route better. Good thing the hollow world hated straight fights. I checked the sand surge angle over our heads and changed plans. Manual combat was stupid. Running at once was risky. Better option, make them hurry in the wrong direction. I threw the archive tags upslope and shouted that the dock key was in the upper niche. Both bit. Greed is a universal operating system. While they turned, Mira slammed her spare cell into the wall rail and overloaded the root line. Sparks, noise, instant panic and confusion. The scavengers jumped for the fake prize just as the upper sand gate released. A full white sheet roared through the channel and cut them out of my schedule for the rest of the day. That little trick cost no reserve, one spare cell, and a future enemy somewhere in the archive. Good trade. We climbed hard for the balcony and reached the pod with 5 minutes left. Launch prep got ugly fast. Fuel 11, battery 14. New payload mass too high for a clean lift. I had to choose between security scrap and extra quartz cases before the phase flipped. I kept the quartz. Data opens doors. Scrap only opens resale. Mira disagreed for 30 seconds and then admitted I was right in the wounded tone of somebody who hates agreeing while tired. R7 integrated the dock key and gave me one clean route. Hollow World to Observatory was impossible on current fuel. Hollow to Ocean Dock was possible if the drift window held steady. The catch, because there is always one, was launch timing. The balcony would remain stable for 4 minutes. After that, the next sand river would cut under our clamps and take the pod with it. Inventory before departure. Oxygen 710 effective. Fuel 10 after warm-up bleed. Battery 13. Water rising. Assets. Mira, R7. Recycler, wafers, dock key, and one working plan. I broke one of my own rules and looked back for a full second. The inner city glowed under moving sand like a library drowning in starlight. Beautiful. Deadly. Built to remember while dying. Then the balcony screamed as its lower brace vanished into the flow. Reason to move confirmed. We cut clamps, fired port thrusters, and rode the outgoing sand plume into dark space. As the hollow world rolled behind us, R7 decoded the last wafer. Maintenance ring C was not empty. One dock still answered local command and kept requesting coolant in regular bursts. So the next world was not just water. It was traffic, machinery, and maybe someone still trying to keep one corner of this system alive with shrinking supplies and bad odds. That made it a perfect target. Resources, truth, and a chance to build something larger than a pod. Also a fine place to die fast if the root math went bad by 1 degree. Mira looked at me, then at the dying star. So the next world is water, she said. I checked fuel, drift, and the white scar in the sun. Good. I needed a cheaper way to stay alive. I hit Ocean World on fumes. The planet below was black water, white storm columns and broken tower tips. Maintenance ring C hung above it like a rusted halo with one light still on. Beauty check. Perfect. Kill check. Also perfect. The sea threw vertical cyclones into orbit. Lightning crawled through the spray, and my pod had fuel for one clean dock attempt. Maybe one. Dock requests still repeated every 90 seconds. Coolant low. Structural drift rising. So the station was alive enough to complain and sick enough to matter. I already liked the math. Inventory on approach. Oxygen 710 effective. Fuel 10. Battery 13. Water 600 milliliters thanks to the recycler. Crew 2 humans, 1 rude drone, 0 margin for heroics. The ring rotated too fast for a standard latch. R7 gave me 2 options. Burn 4 fuel to match rotation, or ride a storm draft and spend battery correcting at the last second. I took the cheaper, stupid option. The draft flung us sideways. My teeth clicked hard enough to hurt, and I spent 5 battery on resonance correction just to stop the pod from cartwheeling. Price paid through the skull again. Sharp pressure behind both eyes, numb lips, and my right hand shaking for maybe a minute. Cheap does not mean free. It means pain instead of fuel. The correction worked. Barely. The pod slammed into Dock C-19. tore off one antenna, and stuck there with 3 clamps and 1 prayer. Fuel still 10. Battery down to 8. Good enough. The airlock inside the dock still held pressure, but the room beyond looked like a machine shop drowned in salt and then dried under bad lighting. Corrosion everywhere. One console still blinking. R7 translated the blinking line. Maintenance ring C. Coolant below safe limit. Requesting core pump reset. I laughed once. A dying world had hired me already and had not asked my rates. Mira checked the bulkheads with the practical disgust of someone who expects floors to betray her. "Can we live here?" she asked. I checked the rust, the seals, and the lightning outside. For now. That "for now" mattered. We could not stay in the pod. Ocean world storms would strip the hull, boil the seals, and eventually toss the whole thing into the water. The ring was temporary shelter, so the first objective of Block 4, if life had title cards, was simple. Make Dock C-19 hold for 7 days. 7 days meant water, air, heat, stable power, and one room that did not leak. First sweet profit came fast. 2 intact pressure panels, 1 emergency heater brick, 1 spool of docking cable, and 3 sealed coolant canisters in a locker behind a dead mech cradle. Resource check after 10 minutes of work. Fuel 10. Battery 8. Oxygen 7 hours because station air reduced suit drain. Water 600. New gain. Coolant. Cable. Heater. Shelter. The dock had one more gift. A half-functional maintenance crawler bolted to the ceiling track. 6 legs, magnet feet, 1 tool arm, 1 dead optic, and a chassis label that read KELP-2. Not a person, not a proper subordinate, but still useful. R7 jumped ports with it for 6 straight minutes while Mira and I cleared debris from the central maintenance pit below the dock. Kelp 2 woke angry. Good. Machines with attitude usually still have working priorities. It clicked 1 optic on and demanded authorized task assignment. I gave it 1. Keep this dock alive. It answered with a refusal, then listed 14 critical failures and 1 recommendation. Reset the coolant pumps in the lower ring before thermal drift cooked every remaining seal. Clear enough. That gave the ocean world its local law. This place was not just a dock. It was part of a cooling network. If the pumps failed, the ring heated, warped, lost orbit, and dropped into the sea. Beautiful world, impossible home, reason to move later already installed. Even if I stabilized Dock C-19, the whole ring would die without the lower pump line. Temporary safety is not safety. I split functions because that is how weak crews stay alive. Mira got salvage and room prep. R7 and KELP-2 got diagnostics. I took the pump line because the expensive, dangerous jobs love me. The lower ring opened only during storm troughs when the external bridge lined up with the dock spine for maybe 12 minutes. Missed the window and the bridge became lightning bait. I watched 1 full cycle first. White cyclones rose from the sea below in strict bands, and blue electric Medusa drifted between them like living lanterns. Gorgeous. Lethal. Clearly expensive later. During the second trough I crossed. External bridge, 200 meters, open to vacuum-thin spray and static. 1 slip, and I was gone. 1 strike, and I was charcoal. Good cardio, terrible mood. The pump chamber sat under a cracked dome with half its floor missing. Coolant lines screamed behind the walls. A red handwheel waited at the far end, like a trap with industrial branding. I could walk the wall route slowly and maybe make it back before the trough closed. Or I could resonance pull a floating panel into place and shortcut the gap for 4 battery and a fresh headache. I paid the 4. The panels slid, locked, and gave me 6 clean steps where there had been none. Price: ringing ears and a bad afterimage of the whole chamber bending left when it was not. Handwheel reset took muscle, not genius. I hate muscle. Mira was not there, so I did it badly, with both hands, boots braced, shoulder nearly dislocated, while the ring screamed around me. The chamber lights turned from red to amber. Pump 1 online. Coolant flow plus 23%. Structural drift down 2 points. It was the first moment the ring felt less like a corpse. Then the trough ended. The bridge outside started taking spray, and spray here was conductive murder. I ran the return route with 1 glove smoking and 1 battery warning screaming in my ear. I made the dock with maybe 40 seconds left. Mira took 1 look at my hand and said, "Next time I turn the wheel, you move the metal." Fair. Division of labor exists for a reason. Repair phase started immediately. Heater brick into the berth room. Pressure panels over the cracked inner shutters. Dock cable into a manual brace line. KELP2 ceiling leaks with ugly competence. With water solved, Mira demanded storage discipline. Wet goods left, dry goods right. Cells tagged by charge. No mystery crates. "A base dies from clutter before it dies from war," she said. Kelp 2 backed her up by ejecting 1 whole bin of useless, corroded bolts into the recycler hopper. The crawler had standards. Good. Standards save more stations than bravery ever will. I used 1 calm cycle on the pod itself. Hull patching, intake cleaning, line checks, and a proper tie-in to the berth hatch. The pod stopped being a visitor and became our detachable shuttle. That mattered strategically. If the ring failed later, we needed a clean emergency launch plan. Weak crews survive by planning exits before they decorate interiors. I am very pro-exit. R7 also uncovered an old galley printer in the wet shop wall. It could not make food, but it could process nutrient slurry into compact ration bars. Efficiency up, dignity down, survival improved. Ocean World kept paying in sideways ways. Storm spray fed the recycler fed water. Water fed cooling loops. Cooling loops stabilized the berth and lowered our oxygen burn even further. I started marking the station on my own wall map. Safe routes in white. Red arcs for lightning slices. Blue circles for Medusa drift. For the first time, this world felt learnable instead of random. Mira noticed that and smirked. "Congratulations," she said. "You have become the sort of man who names corridors." I checked the wall and realized she was right. Dock life was infecting me. We named 1 more space anyway. The narrow service room beside the charge arm became the dry nest. Tool racks, spare seals, 2 fold bunks, and 1 ugly lamp. Terrible room. Excellent morale. Small comforts were not fluff. They were mechanics. Better sleep gave cleaner decisions. Cleaner decisions wasted less battery. Sometimes strategy is just 1 good bunk in a dry room. By the end of the first station night, we had 1 livable compartment the size of a delivery van. Warm, dry enough, and only mildly radioactive according to R7, which counted as romance here. Inventory at first camp milestone. Oxygen effective 840 with station assist. Fuel 10. Battery 4. Water 1 liter thanks to recycler and condenser drip. Shelter established, crew alive. Battery 4 was the real problem. Dock power existed, but only in dead surges. Enough to fry circuits, not enough to run a life support loop. I needed regulated energy before anything else. Ocean World solved that with biology. The blue Medusae drifting between storm columns carried charge in organ sacs and discharged only when startled. Living batteries. Very pretty insurance fraud. Kelp, too, knew the old harvesting method. Do not hunt them with nets. Do not shock them. Anchor a silent buoy. Let them brush conductive fronds and bleed charge slowly into insulated cells. That was elegant, cheap, and absolutely impossible with our current equipment because the insulated fronds were gone. Mira looked at the docking cable. I looked at the heater mesh. Problem solvable. We built the first charge rig in 3 hours. Cost, 1 cable spool, the heater mesh, 2 floor braces, and my last battery point for a resonance weld that made the frame stop trying to die. Price to body. Hands shaking again. Pulse too fast. Eyes refusing to focus for 10 full minutes. The loop hates fine work almost as much as it hates heavy work. Good to know for later upgrades. We launched the buoy during a quiet weather slice. Mira handled the line. I held station on the dock arm. R7 talked to KELP-2 in machine insults while the crawler tuned the intake resistance. The first Medusa touched the fronds and lit the whole buoy blue. Beautiful. Then a second touched it, and the intake needle jumped so hard I thought the cells would burst. We pulled immediately. Profit was absurd. 1 careful harvest gave us 9 battery cells worth of charge, regulated and clean. That doubled our practical lifespan in 1 move and turned Ocean World from threat into income. Inventory after first energy cycle. Oxygen 840. Fuel 10. Battery equivalent 13 again. Water 1.4 liters. Dock stable. New passive option. Medusa charge during calm windows. That was the first true base feeling. Not just hiding in a room. A loop. Shelter into energy. Energy into repairs. Repairs into better shelter. Strategy tastes best when the math starts looping. With power back, R7 opened more of the dock network. Ring C had 3 surviving modules. Our berth, a water condenser wing, and a fuel-cracking bay connected to intake pipes over the ocean. That bay mattered. Ocean biomass plus storm heat could be turned into biofuel, but only if the intake valves below the ring were clear. Of course, they were not clear. This system hated easy money. The intake tower hung beneath the ring above open water and sat right inside one of the smaller cyclone lanes. Too much metal in the wrong phase, and lightning would erase anyone visiting it. So we watched weather. That was the real map of Ocean World. Not corridors, not roads, phases. Calm slice, charge slice, ascent slice, red slice. Move wrong and the world find you in blood. Mira got very good very fast. She sketched storm timing onto a wall with grease pencil and treated every hour like a budget. I trusted that more than optimism. Optimism leaks. Schedules hold. Our second major trip targeted the condenser wing first because water is easier to appreciate than future fuel. The wing had 1 flooded corridor and 1 intact membrane chamber under lock. The lock wanted dock authority plus a maintenance checksum. I had the first from the handshake key and the second from a quartz wafer route tag. Hollow World loot paying dividends already. Inside the chamber sat 4 condenser stacks and 1 dead supervisor terminal. R7 plugged in and found old logs. The ring once supported 200 staff. We were looting a real miniature city. The logs also confirmed the system link. Ocean World was the coolant lung for the Star Core. If this ring and its sister rings failed, the central sun heated faster. 1 more machine in the chain. We repaired 2 condenser stacks with membrane scraps from the recycler and 1 heatsink plate from the ash moon. Old worlds paying for new worlds. Good systems always cross-subsidize survival. Water output tripled. We went from careful sipping to stored reserves. Not luxury, just margin. I counted every milliliter like treasure because margin keeps crews alive. Inventory after condenser restore. Water capacity 3 liters and climbing. Oxygen effective 930. Battery 11 after repairs. Fuel 10. Thermal stability plus another 5 points. Then, Ocean World introduced the cost of visibility. Restoring Dock C19 lit our module marker on the ringnet. Something out in the storm answered with an automated ping we did not recognize. Not a friendly ping either. No dock code, no maintenance tag. Just a sweep request and a silent mark on our hull. Mira saw it and swore in the exact tone used by people with prior bad experience. "Salvage registries," she said. "Somebody out there tracks reactivated stations." Excellent. We had just built our first useful base and also our first invitation to future violence. I filed that problem under Block 5 and kept building, because dead people cannot be robbed anyway. Next objective, fuel cracking bay. Without more fuel, the ring was a cage with better furniture. The bay sat deeper in the lower truss where spray from the sea climbed in permanent silver sheets. Every rail was wet. Every handhold sparked. The world was basically one giant lawsuit. Kelp 2 suggested using insulating shell resin from juvenile medusae. R7 suggested not touching juvenile medusae unless I wanted a comedy death. Mira suggested we trap molted skins instead. Good call. We spent one full cycle collecting translucent membrane scraps snagged on the outer truss. Cheap work. No reserve cost, only bruised shins and one near miss with a discharge plume. Those scraps let us wrap tools, boots, and the first valve key. Suddenly, the lower truss changed from impossible to expensive. I prefer expensive. Impossible pays no dividends at all. The intake valves were blocked by a nest of calcified tube worms the size of cargo hoses. They fed on mineral spray and had grown around the rotating housings like cement with opinions. I could blast them loose with resonance pulses, fast, loud, and likely to crack the valve seat. Or Mira could cut the nest by hand while I held the housing still through the loop. Slower. Better. We took slower. Cost. 6 battery and 30 bad minutes of full-body strain while the loop kept the valve from jerking under pressure. Price in flesh, nosebleed, jaw pain, and one blackout flicker. Mira cut the final ring and the whole nest dropped into the sea. Intake 1 cleared. The fuel-cracking bay came online with a roar that sounded exactly like future mobility and smarter decisions. Biomass slurry started feeding the old processors. Output was ugly, low-grade, and glorious. We had local fuel now. Not much, but enough to stop treating every thruster burn like a funeral choice. Inventory after fuel line restore. Fuel 12 and slowly rising. Battery 5. Water 4 liters. Oxygen effective 920. Ring stability up again. Mobility no longer on life support. That was the midpoint transformation. I had arrived in a pod with 1 room and 1 plan. Now I had a dock, power loop, water loop, fuel loop, 1 ally, 2 machine helpers, and a real schedule. Of course, the world charged rent. 3 large storm predators started circling the ring after the fuel bay warmed the lower spray with waste heat. Long bodies, clear fins, lightning in the spine. R7 called them current eels. They fed on charged runoff and loved fresh cables. One of them bit our Medusa buoy line in half during the next calm slice and cost us a full charge cycle. Straight combat was stupid. The eels were faster than suits and happier in open spray than any human should be. So I did what weak people always do when the world is unfair. I used the world. Kelp 2 found an old pulse beacon in a storage arm. Mira rebuilt the emitter with condenser plates. I set it on a detached service float 300 meters from our dock and overcharged the coil. The pulse called the eels exactly as planned. Then the next storm slice rolled in, and the float drifted into a narrow discharge band between two cyclone columns. I only had to keep timing clean. At the right second, I used a tiny resonance nudge on the float bracket. Tiny by mass, huge by nerve cost. My vision whitened for 2 beats, and my left ear lost sound entirely for a minute. The float tipped. The beacon spat one final pulse. All 3 eels lunged at the metal frame together, just as a storm lash crossed the band. The sea lit white and solved the problem for me. Profit from dead predators was better than expected. Their spine nodes stored charge, and their skins made tougher insulation than Medusa mold. Beautiful. The local food chain had become inventory. We upgraded the charge buoy with eel spine regulators and wrapped the dock braces in eel skin sheathing. Energy intake became safer, and line losses dropped by 19%. Nice, clean gains. That upgrade also changed Mira. She stopped calling the dock a stopover and started calling sectors by names. Berth, wet shop, charge arm, tank room. People name things when they expect to stay. I noticed the shift because I felt it too. The station still could not be home forever, but it had become our first actual base. A place that produced, stored, and improved instead of just enduring. R7 used restored power to open one more archive in the supervisor terminal. Maintenance Ring C had once coordinated with an observatory node to calculate safe interworld transfer windows. That made the next route clearer. We needed the observatory eventually, but current fuel and hull condition still said no. Ocean World had to finish paying first. So we kept investing here. 3 more cycles of work turned gain into structure. Mira organized shelves and storm charts. KELP-2 ran leak patrol. R7 mapped hidden utility tunnels. I repaired what moved and counted what held. Weekly style inventory, because numbers are how I trust progress. Fuel 15. Battery reserve 13 with passive charge cycles. Water 7 liters. Oxygen 11 hours. Crew status. Me. Functional. Hand tremor low. Hearing in left ear mostly back. Mira. Sleep deprived but dangerous. R7. Sarcastic. KELP-2. Loyal to task structure and deeply offended by dirt. Base status. 1 livable berth. 1 wet shop. 1 charge arm. 1 fuel bay. 2 working condenser stacks, partial ring control, and 1 external buoy field, from pod to station. That felt good. The system rewarded that feeling with information instead of fireworks. 1 recovered maintenance map showed a sealed spindle vault in the central hub. Another showed a hard line to the observatory. Both routes passed through the ring spine, and the spine was dark because the central relay was offline. Restore estimate. 8 battery, 1 eel regulator, 1 safe weather window. I had the parts. What I did not have was certainty. Restoring the spine would light more of the ring, open more rooms, and make us visible from much farther out to strangers. Mira wanted the relay anyway. If somebody is tracking station wakes, hiding in the dark only delays them, she said. Fair logic. Bad comfort. Usually the same thing in useful allies. So we restored it. 8 battery gone. 1 regulator gone. 2 hours of careful line work under static. Price in body. Trembling shoulders and 1 burst capillary in my eye. The reward was enormous. The whole local spine woke in stages. Corridor lights. Dock tags. Pump data. Traffic ghosts. Then 1 huge rotating hologram of the system unfolded over the supervisor table. There it was, 6 worlds, 1 dead star. multiple anchor lines, cooling routes from ocean world to the core, archive lines from hollow world, observatory windows controlling transfer geometry. The worlds were not neighbors. They were organs. If one failed, the rest inherited damage. I was not surviving in ruins anymore. I was inside one machine, and it was dying. Then the hologram added a problem. A red icon appeared near the outer drift lane. Unknown vessel. Registry handshake requested. Then denied. Then forced passive scan directed straight at Ring C. Someone had seen the relay wake. Someone with engines, distance, and enough protocol knowledge to sniff active stations. Salvagers, raiders, or old system scavengers. None were charity workers. Mira looked at the red icon for 3 seconds and said the practical thing. "How long until they get here?" R7 ran relative drift and answered in the tone I hate most. "Soon enough to matter." So Block 4 ended the only correct way. We had a base worth stealing, loops worth protecting, and just enough warning to be afraid in a productive direction. Perfect. Fear with numbers is strategy. The unknown vessel did not arrive politely. It came out of outer drift like a hooked blade with engines on one side and salvage arms on the other. Fast, ugly, and already aiming at Ring C. R7 stole the registry tag before it completed approach. Black wake cutter, civilian shell, raider habits, crew estimate 14 to 18. Armament, 2 harpoons, 1 breech saw, 4 hard suits. Mira looked at the silhouette and said the name like a bad memory. Latch Cartel. Good scavengers if you were dead. Very bad neighbors if you were alive and had a working dock. In a straight fight, I lost. Their hull was armed. Mine was a repaired closet tied to a maintenance ring. Their crew had guns. My best assets were 1 dock, 1 wet robot, and timing. Quick count before panic. Fuel 15. Battery reserve 13. Water 7 liters. Oxygen 11 hours effective. Charge buoys 6. Medusa lures 3. Courage enough for 1 terrible decision. The cutter hailed once with a clean salvage claim and a fake emergency tone. Then it switched to external scan and tagged our charge arm, fuel bay, and relay spine in under 5 seconds. So they knew what mattered. That made my job easier. Smart raiders are predictable because they always accelerate toward value. Stupid raiders are worse. These were organized greed with engines. I wanted their engine core, not for pride, for range. The observatory route existed on paper, but my pod still flew like a cracked kettle. Without better thrust, future plans stayed theoretical. So, Block 5 wrote its own rule. I could not beat the cutter. I had to make the cutter beat the station, the weather, and its own greed while I pushed numbers at the right second. Ocean World gave me one major gift besides water. Regular storm columns. Every 7 hours, charge fronts climb from the sea and lick the lower rings with wet static and bad intentions. Normal crews hid from those fronts. Our dock survived because KELP-2 kept bleed channels clear, and because I had spent a week learning exactly where the charge crawled and where it did not. That was the answer. I could not shoot the raiders down. I could invite them into a docking posture, lock them to Ring C, bait them deeper, and let the storm become the big weapon. The problem was timing. Next full charge front. 2 hours, 12 minutes. Too long to simply wait under open scan. If they sniffed the trap, they would cut the arm off and board from range. New objective chain. Step 1. Keep them interested. Step 2. Bring them close. Step 3. Force hard dock. Step 4. Trap the hull in charge water and live through my own idea. I split tasks fast. Mira mined the spine corridors and rigged manual shutters. R7 prepared false manifests showing fuel and archive cargo. KELP, 2 prime pumps, and pretended to be obedient junk. My job was reserve economy and body management. Big loop moves would be needed at the end, not the start. So I spent only 2 reserve on scan pings and 1 on line diagnostics. Mira loved the fake cargo idea once she realized it would hurt raiders. We stacked empty crates around the fuel bay, left 1 real quartz case visible, and let the camera feeds leak on purpose. Then, we opened 1 external channel and performed weakness. I answered the cutter in a tired voice, claimed relay instability, and offered trade. Fuel for water, docking at Ring C only. Their captain called himself VAR. His face stayed hidden behind polarized glass, but his tone had that polished scavenger confidence of a man used to negotiating with people he already owned. He offered help at gunpoint, which saved time. "Stand by for inspection," he said. Translation: they would board, inventory, seize the dock, then decide whether to keep us useful or dead. Good. Inspection meant close range. Close range meant dock clamps. Dock clamps meant a path from their beautiful engine core to every wet conductive line KELP2 had spent days cleaning. We used the remaining 2 hours like professionals with bad odds. Mira placed charges on the upper hatch joints, not to kill boarders, but to cut retreat routes when the panic started. R7 rewrote 3 station tags so the cutter would see our inner berth as the safest lock point. KELP2 extended cleaning arms and hid them under tarp like harmless maintenance clutter. I walked the storm map twice and marked the future current path on my wrist. If I missed the alignment by more than a meter, the charge front would burn our own dock before it touched theirs. Inventory before contact. Fuel 15. Reserve 12 after prep. Water 7 liters. Oxygen 1040 effective. 6 charge buoys hidden below Ring C. Corridor mines set. Weather on schedule. The cutter slowed at 300 meters and launched 2 suit scouts first. Smart again. They used cable anchors, thermal masks, and jammer packs. Straight line? No. Probe and strip approach. I didn't fight them at the hull. I let them touch the outer catwalk, let them scan the charge arm, and let them report exactly what I wanted. Weak defenses, usable fuel, tired survivors. 1 scout tried the sealed upper crawl where Mira had planted her first toy. The joint charge fired, the hatch folded inward, and the scout survived just long enough to scream useful fear. The second scout ran for the berth and met KELP2. For the first time in recorded station history, a maintenance unit weaponized sanitation. It hit the raider with superheated foam and rails. The scout went over the catwalk instead of through it. No grand duel. Just 1 bad step after 1 very offended cleaning machine. I immediately promoted KELP2 in my heart, and nowhere else. VAR reacted exactly right for a man like him. He stopped probing and committed. Their cutter pushed hard for berth alignment. Harpoons fired, clamps extended, and the whole ugly hull came in. Impact shook every bolt in the berth. The first harpoon punched through our outer rail and anchored deep. The second missed the frame and almost clipped our condenser stack. Too close already. Boarders came through 3 routes at once: lower cargo, relay spine, and upper service hatch. 10 total by my count. Better armed than us, heavier suits, and no reason to preserve station life. Mira took the spine group with patience instead of heroics. She let them pass the first shutter, sealed it behind them, then vented coolant fog and made the corridor a blind maze of bad footing. R7 handled the cargo route by turning every station voice line into contradictory orders. Open this hatch. Close that hatch. Pressure warning. Fire warning. False command is still a weapon. I handled the upper hatch because fate hates me personally. First boarder through the frame got my pry bar in the wrist. Second one got the hatch slammed on his suit hose. Practical combat only. I still paid for it. One glancing round took paint and skin off my shoulder. Nothing vital. Just enough blood to make every future movement louder than I wanted, and every reserve hit sharper. Var himself stayed aboard the cutter and pushed for fast seizure. That was his mistake. He treated Ring C as loot attached to a hull. I needed him attached when the weather arrived. Storm countdown, 26 minutes. Too long for a pure stall if his crew reached the relay room. So I escalated. I ordered R7 to fake a reactor surge in our fuel bay and leak it wide. Raiders love two things: concentrated value and panic. The false surge offered both. 3 of Var's boarders broke route and sprinted for the bay. Another 2 pulled back to help with a secure tow. Exactly what I needed. More bodies on the cutter. More focus on the central berth. Fewer disciplined pushes through the side corridors. The station did not need to beat them. It needed to shape them. Mira's spine trap bought the next 10 minutes. She flooded one section, cut gravity rails, and forced the boarders to crawl through a maintenance slit one at a time. She was terrifying when annoyed. Kelp, too, became the hidden hero of the whole defense. While the raiders chased fake manifests, it rerouted brine and wash water through the lower dock channels exactly where I had asked. That brine mattered. Dry metal sparks. Wet, salted metal carries stories. When the storm front climbed, I wanted Ring C to speak directly to the cutter hull with maximum emphasis and no ambiguity. Storm countdown, 11 minutes. Reserve 12. Minimum alignment move forecast, 10 if I wanted a full path from C column to lower ring, through clamps into the cutter spine. Ugly math. I could lower the cost by using our 6 charge buoys. The buoys would shape the front, but only if I sent them out beyond safe tether lines under active incoming fire. Also ugly. Also necessary. Mira volunteered before I finished the sentence. She and KELP-2 launched from the lower arm, clipped 3 buoys to the outer guideline, and dragged 3 more by hand through spray and sparks. I watched the camera feed with my jaw locked hard enough to hurt. One raider on overwatch spotted them and fired. Mira lost a shoulder plate. KELP-2 lost 1 manipulator arm and kept moving. All 6 buoys went live. Formation looked wrong by half a meter. Close enough for luck, not close enough for trust. I would still need the loop to correct the final path under storm load. Storm countdown, 3 minutes. Var finally understood the geometry and tried to break dock. Too late. KELP-2 had already hardened 2 clamps, and Mira had cut one of the cutter's release cables. The cutter engines burned hot, dragged us sideways, and nearly tore the berth in half. Our charge arm snapped. 1 condenser burst. The whole station screamed like a stabbed boiler. That was the point where normal people stop escalating. I grabbed the supervisor rail, opened the loop, and started drawing route vectors straight across active live weather. Reserve available, 12. Predicted cost for full redirection, 11. Body risk, severe neural feedback, motor loss, blackout likely. I approved it because dying slower was worse. The charge front hit the lower C first, climbed in a white-blue wall, and split around the first 2 buoys exactly as planned. Then it drifted offline toward our own berth. Of course it did. So I corrected it by hand. 1 meter, then 2, then 3. Every adjustment felt like shoving needles through both eyes and into the back of my skull. I tasted copper and forgot my own name once. The path locked at last. C-column to buoy lattice to lower clamps, clamps to hard dock to cutter keel. Then the whole storm found the richest metal object in the lane. It was beautiful in the way explosions are beautiful when they happen to somebody else. White arcs skated across the cutter hull, found every wet seam, and turned Var's ship into a screaming grid. Our station took the edge, too. Light strips burst. Half the berth went blind. My left leg stopped listening below the knee for 3 terrifying seconds. Then the world turned sideways and black. I came back on the floor with water in my ear, and Mira slapping my face with professional irritation. Outside, the cutter hung crooked off Ring C, engines dead, one whole flank open to vacuum spray. Var's boarders who were still inside the ring lost all appetite for conquest at once. Some ran for the airlocks. Some dropped weapons. One tried to pull me up and then remembered we were enemies. Mira solved the surrender issue with simple economics. Throw the guns down and get a suit route, or keep them and drift. Suddenly, everyone became very cooperative and morally flexible. Price report. Because victory without accounting is just loud confusion. Charge arm gone. 1 condenser stack gone. Outer berth damaged 40%. KELP-2 missing an arm. My reserve at 0. Body report. Nose bleeding. Vision doubled. Left leg weak. Hands shaking hard enough to blur tool work. Loop overuse successful. I hated that sentence. It always arrived attached to pain. We boarded the cutter only after the hull cooled enough not to cook us through the suit. Var was alive, angry, and trapped behind a welded hatch. I thanked the storm on behalf of civilization. The engine room was the prize. Compact fusion assist. Better thrust vector grid. Real armor on the coolant jackets. This one module was worth more than every salvage run since I woke in the pod. We also found route data, spare cells, 6 intact hard suits, and 1 sealed black box marked Observatory Relay Priority. That box mattered enough that even Mira stopped making jokes. R7 opened it under isolation and played the log in a stripped voice. Observatory Command confirmed controlled shutdown of the core star. Reason omitted. Orbit anchors to remain dark until review. So the star had not merely failed. Someone in authority had ordered the system to die slowly and cleanly. That changed every future decision. Repair was no longer neutral. It meant taking sides. Var finally talked when Mira showed him the black box. Latch Cartel was not acting alone. They were paid to watch for relay wakes and deliver keys, maps, or live technicians to a bigger client. He never got to name the client. A burst ping hit the dead cutter from deep range and burned his implant to useless slag before the sentence finished. Somebody out there cleaned loose ends fast. That upgraded the horizon threat immediately. We had beaten a raider ship, not the buyer behind it. I hated invisible management almost as much as oxygen problems, which says a lot. Still, Block 5 counted as a win by any honest scale. We survived. We held Ring C. We stole an engine core. We gained suits, cells, and proof that the system was being killed on purpose. We spent the next hours stabilizing leaks and cutting the cutter free before the next storm took both hulls at once. Kelp 2 got a temporary arm made from salvage clamps and pure resentment. Inventory after the battle. Fuel 28 once the new core was integrated. Battery reserve 5 after emergency drain. Water 5 liters. Oxygen 10 hours and climbing with partial repairs. The engine core solved range. The black box solved direction. The observatory was no longer just one more world. It was the place that knew why the star was ordered to die and who still enforced it. One last problem remained before departure. Ring C could not be our forever base anymore. The relay wake, battle signature, and burned cutter had turned us from hidden scavengers into a visible node. Reason to leave confirmed. stay, and the next visitor would come heavier, better paid, and less willing to board into traps twice. Leave, and we might get answers before the hunters closed in. So I set the next objective the same way I set all the others, with numbers first. Repair window, 16 hours. Fuel to observatory, possible. Storm lane, narrow. Risk, high. Reward, everything. Mira stood beside the dock and watched the dead cutter drift. "We just robbed raiders and insulted whoever owns them," she said. I checked the star fracture, the black box, and the new engine readout. "Good," I said. "If the system is dying on purpose, then somebody built a switch. I want the room with that switch in it." The observatory lens rose on the horizon like a patient eye. 16 repair hours later, Ring C looked less like a dying dock and more like a bad decision with better wiring. Good enough. In this system, good enough was just another spelling of alive. Inventory before departure. Fuel 28. Battery 9. Water 6 liters. Oxygen 12 hours effective. Hull integrity 62. Crew 2 humans, 2 machines, and no spare luck. That was the real summary of the first arc. I had started in a closet with 9 hours of air and 14 minutes of thrust. Now I had range, docking rights, a recycler, and people to lose. Mira checked every seal twice and insulted me 3 times before breakfast. That was her version of loyalty. R7 claimed my route plan was optimistic. That was his version of affection, apparently. Kelp 2 clung to the outer hull with its temporary arm and kept tightening bolts nobody had assigned. The drone had no memory package for fear, but it understood damage and did not enjoy repeats. "Say it out loud," Mira told me while I loaded the last coolant cells. She knew the rule by now. Numbers first. Emotion second if there was any room left after arithmetic finished eating the day. So I said it. Fuel enough for 1 clean push to the observatory if the storm lane stayed open. Battery enough for 1 hard loop burst, or 3 careful ones. Margin thin. Objective worth the risk. The dying star helped make the choice. Overnight, the fracture line widened again. Even from Ring C, the central light looked less like a sun and more like an egg about to split open. That answered the stay question. The system was losing time, and stable docks become targets. If I wanted answers, I had to move before answers came looking for me with bigger engines. Before launch, I did 1 more pass through the black box from the Raider cutter. Most of it was heat-scored junk, but 1 packet survived with a clean priority stamp from Observatory Authority. It was not a full order, just a route fragment and 1 sentence. "Recover all unauthorized navigators before lens cycle 9. I read it twice and liked it less each time. New job title acquired. "Unauthorized navigator," Mira said. "Sounds expensive." She was right. In dead systems, any clean official title usually comes with chains, extraction teams, and very little patient dialogue. I spent 3 battery on a resonance sweep of the lane ahead. The loop lit hidden drag currents between Ring C and the next orbit. Price: ringing ears, cold fingers, and 1 blind spot. The sweep returned 1 useful gift: a narrow, safe channel woven between magnetic spikes and old debris, 6 minutes wide. Miss it and we would burn double fuel, or wait through another storm wall. That made the launch window a real timer, which is how I prefer my problems: rude, measurable, and impossible to negotiate with. Mira strapped in. R7 locked the new core and rerouted thrust. I gave Ring C 1 last look before sealing the canopy. The dock lights blinked weakly over black water and storm columns. We had turned a corpse into a base, then a base into a launch point. Was it worth it? Mira asked as the clamps released. I checked the numbers again. Better air, better range, better data. One enemy cutter burned. One engine core gained. Yes, worth it. We cleared the ring on a shallow vector and let the new core do what the old one never could. Push without sounding like a dying animal. The pod stopped feeling borrowed and started feeling mine. That feeling lasted 40 seconds. Then the system map updated and painted 3 moving contacts on the far side of Ocean World. Same black wake pattern. Heavier signatures this time. So there was the immediate consequence. We had not beaten a faction. We had annoyed an office. Somebody above the raiders had noticed the missing cutter, the wake scar, and Ring C answering us. Good. I preferred visible enemies to elegant mysteries. Elegant mysteries always waited until you ran out of oxygen before becoming practical. Hostile ships at least arrived on engines. The route to the observatory crossed the shadow side of the system. Broken rings, silent mirrors, debris fields lit by a cracking fake star. Beautiful in the expensive way this system liked. R7 used the quiet stretch to decode another wafer from the hollow world. It mapped cooling routes and pressure relays. The observatory did not just observe. It balanced traffic for the whole system. So the machine was clearer now. Ash Moon vented. Hollow World archived. Ocean World cooled and fueled. The observatory calculated. If it failed, everything else lost timing, windows, and order. That meant the next world would pay in information, not food. Dangerous in a different way. You cannot drink root math, but sometimes one line of it is worth a cargo hold of batteries. Mira must have read my face because she asked the right question. If the observatory knows all routes, why didn't whoever shut down the star just erase the records and leave? Good question. My best answer was the ugly one, because they still needed the system working just enough to catch strays, control traffic, and decide who moved where. Managed collapse. She was quiet after that. Then she said, "So we're not just scavengers anymore." I watched the 3 distant contacts correct their course. "No," I said. "Now we're evidence." Halfway through the transfer lane, the pod passed old navigation buoys. Most were dark. One still blinked a slow white pattern that matched no emergency code. R7 knew from public memory. I tuned the loop to it and paid 2 battery for a passive listen. The signal was weak, but human. A stored warning repeated across years. Lens access restricted. Core chamber sealed. By whom? Mira asked. I checked the packet tail and felt my stomach drop. Same authority family as the black box order. Same source tree. The people behind the shutdown still owned the doors. Ahead of us, the observatory rose out of the dark like a broken crown of glass and metal. Behind us, the hunter contacts kept coming. Good. Now we had pressure from both directions.